Hello everyone, I'm Black Marvin. I'm a progressive psychedelic trance artist. I'm a professional sound designer and I'm also a teacher for electronic music production. Today we're going to discuss how to get a deep low end in your track. So I've been wanting to do this video for a long time. I have a long list of topics that those are stuff that I want to talk about, but life. I just very busy. There's always other videos too. But yeah, today it's time to talk about a deep low end, how to get that in your track, how to achieve that. The reason why I'm doing this now is because in the span of 2 days, I had to give a very similar feedback to 3 different students. And I was like, okay, now it's time to talk about it. And the thing is that this is not as direct as, let's say, learning to sidechain, or let's say you say, oh, you need to sidechain this or filter that. Those are very straight to the point and simple operations in music production. But achieving a deep low end, let's say your track is lacking presence, because that was the problem. These students, they attempted to do their own masters, which is a great thing for practicing. And when you'd put the track side by side with the reference track, loudness levels were similar, in the ballpark. But if you took a look at the low end, the reference track was going much deeper. And also their track lacked just sub presence in the very low end. And yeah, this is something, like I said, it's complex. We're going to dissect everything about this today. It's going to be a discussion with examples. It's going to be fun. It's a very fun topic. Now, let's start with the very beginning of all this. When we're talking about sub-frequencies, we're talking about everything below 250 hertz to 30 hertz and even below. Those are the sub-frequencies. Maybe someone would say that it goes above a bit, 250 hertz, but I wouldn't bother. And especially, this is going to be another discussion, but after 250 hertz and around 500 hertz, there's some nasty stuff that's happening. So I don't want to discuss that. And to me, this is not considered, it's not sub information anymore. It's problematic, maybe sometimes in a different way, but let's focus on 250 hertz to 30 hertz and below. Now, the thing about this end of the spectrum is that the lower you go, the slower the waves are, and they behave differently than the top end of the spectrum. Let's say you have over-accumulation of content at whatever, 2.5K, let's say. It's fairly easy to diagnose and also to take direct action to solve that. Most of the time, you're going to take, let's say, an EQ, and you're going to target this specific frequency. There's other tools like resonance suppressors, multiband compressors, but you get my point. It's easy to take action in this place. Now, for the sub frequencies, it's a bit different. Let's say you're listening to a reference track and comparing your track, and at 50 hertz, you feel it's lacking. And most of the time, it's not going to be targeted as specific frequencies. The problem that most people have, and the challenge is that, it's their low end doesn't feel as fat, as deep as the reference track. Because most of the time you can still go punch a specific frequency, but it's much harder to go like punch the very low end of the spectrum. It's not as easy as putting an EQ and targeting stuff. You can do that, but like I said, these frequencies, they behave differently. Before you start to apply the techniques we're going to see later, there's an elephant in the room that we need to discuss about. And it's a voluntary pun, an elephant in the room, because we need to discuss about your room, your listening setup. When you're beginning music production, it doesn't really matter because in any way, your ears are not trained. But if you're at a point where you want to mix and master, you're using reference track and you want to fix the low end of your track, you're going to need a somewhat good room to listen to your work. And it needs acoustic treatment. You could have the best monitors available, the best pair of speaker. it's just going to sound like a clearer mess, but it's still going to sound messy. I don't want to dive fully into everything that is like room treatment acoustics, but we're gonna talk about some stuff that needs to be addressed. There's some really good videos on YouTube about specifically the acoustics, what kind of acoustic treatment that you can do. But let's say, let's go back to what we saw in the first time. The lower the frequencies are, the slower the waves are, and it's just easier for stuff to collide. And this is true in the digital domain. So this is related to the techniques we're going to see, but this is also true to your room. So low frequencies, they're going to bounce in a different way than the higher frequencies. And if you have nothing to absorb, if you have nothing to treat the acoustic in any way, waves are going to bounce off the walls. They're going to collide together multiple times. And what you're going to hear is not the original signal. It is somewhat of a frequency soup that is most of the time not going to be accurate at best. And it might actually trick your ears at worst. So if you're currently in this situation, you're trying to just get better at this stuff, and you don't have any kind of acoustic treatment, I would suggest that you start with that. That's not, it's not as fun as getting a new synth. It's not as glamour as, some other stuff you can acquire for your studio, but this is so important. And this is going to be, it's going to make a huge difference for you, and it's going to be a much more enjoyable for you to try to solve these problems. Regarding acoustic treatment, there's two stuff I want to talk about. Like I said, this is a whole topic, this is a whole rabbit hole, but if you want to attempt to solve this low end problem, there's two things. First, the early reflection point. This is the first place where sound is going to bounce off your wall. If you have nothing there, it's kind of asking for trouble, really. I'm gonna possibly link some videos about that. There's this topic has been very well discussed already, so you want to take care of that with some acoustic panels. Honestly, if you're on a budget, you can actually just make some yourself. The gap between not doing anything for your acoustics and doing a little bit is actually a huge step. This is where, when you want to go into the details, it gets a bit more complex. But like I said, this early reflection point is really not that hard to take care of, and this is going to make a huge difference. Now, the second thing is bass traps. You're going to see we're going to come back a lot to this topic. The fact that the low frequencies are very slow waves. So you want to trap the bass. You want to trap these frequencies, and it's just a way to reduce this frequency soup and get a much more clearer response. So instead of dealing with like just the waves bouncing multiple times, you're going to reduce that phenomenon, and this is going to like just unblur this whole picture for you. So this is another concept that you should definitely take a look into it. So early reflection point, bass traps, either one or the other, or just a little bit of both if you're on a budget. And if you have infinite budget, man, just look at, there's some kits available. There's some custom stuff you can have, but really you need some kind of acoustic treatment. Now, another thing that can actually shoot you in the foot when you're trying to work the low frequencies is, let's picture today as being a very vertical video. I mean vertical because we're going to take a look at like how to create a deep low end. But there's this whole horizontal thing, okay, that we can say that, let's talk about the phase alignment and phase interaction with your low end elements, and also the envelope ADSR of the sound. If this is not managed properly, this can also trick your ears a lot and just make things very difficult to work in that area. I want to make a video eventually called how to make a tight low end or something like that. Today we're going to focus on, how deep we can make it and fat. But let's just say that if this isn't properly managed, and especially in sidetrance with rolling bassline, anything that has a lot of information repeating quickly, and even in side tech, if this is not managed properly, this is going to cause a lot of harm and confusion as well. All right, now what we're going to see now is really what I wanted to talk about. But since this is a very complex topic, it was very important for me to talk about the room treatment, acoustic treatment of your room, your listening setup, phase alignment. Also, this changes things in the low end. But now, since this is concepts that you understand and that you are aware, now we can really discuss about how to make your low end deeper. So we are inside FL Studio. I have a track here, which is going to be perfect for what we want to discuss today. This is a solar punk track titled Méfiance, and it's unreleased for the moment. I know it says Pace Tech, but Pace Tech is just an old name that I just never went forward with. But yeah, what we have today is going to be perfect for what we want to discuss. This has been mixed and mastered. I have a finished version of this, but right now what we are listening to is just the mixing stems. There's no processing at all. So it's like in the process of being mixed. Now this is how it sounds all together. Now I'm going to be using ADPTR Metric. If you don't have this, just make sure you have something that is equivalent, because all that we're going to discuss today, you're not going to be able to apply if you have some proper metering and referencing plugin. So what this one allows me to do, there's other ways to do that for sure. You can do it manually, but this one has some ways to isolate the spectrum. And it's really good because we have a sub isolation. So that's what we're going to do today. And now we only have the sub information of this track. And you can see that the part of the spectrum we're working with is, well, 10 hertz to around 60 hertz, actually. So this is what's being isolated right now for us. Now I want to discuss EQs. Remember when I was saying that, let's say you lack presence at 30 hertz. It's not as easy as taking an EQ and pushing at 30 hertz. Because especially with these types of EQ, let me show you something. So that's the Choral 2 EQ inside Plugin Doctor. So let's say there's something I want to work at 30 hertz. Okay, so let's get 32 and get a curve. What happens now? You can actually see that this is a wideband mastering equalizer. The reason why I really like to work the low end with these types of EQs is that you can see first that even though this is at 32 hertz, actually on this knob, it's far more complex than just a push at 32 hertz. There's a curve, it's a wide band, and the reason why these bands are so good to work with is that they've been designed on purpose to get a specific behavior out of the sound. Let's see other settings. Now this is at 101 hertz. We have a different curve. So you can see that this is targeting some stuff there. But I have to admit, the shelf on the Choral 2 EQ is not the one I use to work the low end. I'll show you my settings. On all my tracks, my favorite technique to just fine-tune the presence in the low frequencies is this knob here, which is a bell. And I select the frequencies where I want to target it. And you can see that this is not targeting the very, very, very low end, but sometimes changing the frequencies here, changing the curve, you're actually going to get some really good results on the very, very low end, and also how everything is perceived down below. Because like I said, these frequencies, they don't behave like the top end. They behave differently, and changing stuff around here can actually have some very noticeable effects Also, a challenge that with the low end you can experience is that is if you think like, okay, I'm going to target the very low end to get a fat low end, it might not result in how you want it to be. So you'd be surprised how using shelves, but not even just shelves of analog style EQs like this, but just literally going to push with a shelf, it might result into an overload and just a low end that feels oversaturated, but it's not going to sound fat like you would want it to do. This is a challenge that a lot of producers have. Actually, they want to work the very low end. They're going to be targeting even not just with analog EQs. They're going to get like a Pro Q. They're going to make a shelf. Right? And you're like, here you go. Yeah, I'm pushing at 65 hertz because I'm pushing the very low end, and you're not getting the reaction you would like to. So I'm gonna put linear phase maximum. So you can definitely hear that this low shelf is really not cutting it. Now let's try to do a bell. And yeah, somehow I'm going where I think it should go. I'm pushing, and by the way, I'm on linear phase. We're gonna. Should I include this today? Yeah, we're on linear phase. So basically, we're not even changing anything on the phase. We're really just purely pushing in the spectrum, and yet we're not getting what we want. Actually, we're getting what most producers experience, and it's just a weird oversaturated signal in the low end, but you're not getting that deep low end and fat low end that you like. So just to summarize my point, low frequencies behave differently than high frequencies, and using analog style EQs with curves that are designed to be musical and interact in a very beneficial way with the spectrum, you might actually get some much better results with these types of EQs. And you'd be surprised how targeting somewhere in the spectrum, not necessarily where you feel it's lacking, you might get some surprising result and behavior in the low end that might contribute to a deeper low end. Now, another thing I want to show is an EQ trick that you can do to maybe get a fatter low end. I say maybe because this is something that is very signal dependent. Like much of the treatment that we've seen, like I've explained on that Coral 2 EQ, sometimes I'm always using the same knob, but I'm never targeting the exact same frequencies. I know there's like a very good ballpark, and I know that, but since every track, the incoming signal is different, then it's going to change the way I'm going to choose how to EQ it. Okay, so I'm going to take Britchannel, which is an awesome free EQ plugin that you can have right now. Now I'm going to show you this trick with this EQ, but the original trick is the Pultec trick EQ. You might know this or you might not know this, but this is a type of EQ that you can do a combination of high passing and boosting at the same time. And the way these two acts can actually create a perception of a fat low end. Now, this one is not the original one, but it still has the functions and the feature we need to do that trick. Now, actually, I'll show you a bit more of the original trick later, but this is the one I recommend that you use. It's free, by the way, Britchannel. It's an awesome free plugin. That's also why I showed this one, because it's free and you can very, very easily start doing this in your projects. So the idea is quite simple. We're going to high pass. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but actually it's also sometimes high passing can actually give you a fatter and deeper low end because of the way it interacts with the low frequencies. So you're going to high pass, and then you're gonna boost somewhere in the low realm. And once again, we're gonna check a couple of these. So I don't know if you hear, but it actually feels like more solid in the low end. Speaking of acoustics, you might need a very good setup to hear that if you're listening on headphones right now, or just iPhone, or your phone. I'm I'm sorry for you, but you won't hear anything. Now let's isolate the spectrum and do a bypass now. Yeah, so at the end, I wanted to overdo it just a bit so you guys really perceive how it affects things. Just so you know, this trick right here, it's gonna change the phase. So, if we align some stuff here, it's not even going to be accurate after that in the change. So you might either maybe want to refrain from correcting the phase too early in your chain, or if you want, you can just reflip it later in your processing. That's what I tend to do just at the very, very end when everything is done. I'm doing like a phase check and like a last alignment. So completely different result with this trick. Now I want to show you how these curves really look, because once again, you feel, okay, we're high passing at 50 Hertz. Now we're pushing at 60 or 110. Well, I'll show you how it really looks. First, that's the high pass. And then you have your bell push here. Once again, this trick I think you should attempt it often, but I can't, and I will never say that on every bass it's going to work. And this is something that you can do on like just every time, because once again, this is very dependent on the incoming signal. Okay, so I switched bass line right now because I wanted to work with something else. This is coming from a bootleg I did. A reason how I'm choosing a bootleg is that might look silly, but I don't want to get copyright strike from my own stuff. Using my own track could get me some copyright strike. So anyway, so I'm using a bootleg. It's pure bassline that is not going to get recognized by the algorithm, and it's a progressive psytrance bassline. So it has a bit of rolling, but it's not one of your full on rolling bass lines. Sounds like this. Now I want to show you something a bit closer to the original Pultec trick. Going to use Acoustic Coffee ThePUn, which is free as well. Really trying to use free plugins so you can start applying some stuff right now. This one is an emulation of the Pultec. I don't have, the original unit, either in the emulation or in just hardware, obviously. But this is very close to it. So same concept, we're going to low cut and boost at the same time. And this one it's literally done for this. That's why you have these two together. So I'm going to cut and then boost. And you can see how it's going to affect the low end. And now let's do a bypass. Now let's do a bypass with the sub isolated. That was the EQ trick closer to its original intent. And you can see it changed the low end feeling. Now I want to talk about high passing the low end with a parametric EQ. And I want to talk about all the stuff that is related to that. The reason why you would attempt that, and once again, this is something, I can't say that this is something that you can do every time and that it's working every time, like 60% of the time it works every time. But I'm saying this is something you can attempt. And the reason why you would want to do that is it's like an extreme version of the same reason why you would high pass your leads, for example. Hopefully you're high passing your leads. And so you're high passing your leads to create some space in the low end, because like we've said, everything, the lower you go, the more easy it is for stuff to collide in that area. So obviously leads, you don't need low end information, but even on some very low end, you don't necessarily need the whole information all the way down. And especially sub frequencies at a certain point, they become so low and so slow that they don't necessarily behave the best way. So a classic high pass technique is at 30 hertz. And since right now we are working with a parametric EQ, and voluntarily, I have this duck overlay because I'm using this as an oscilloscope because I want to talk about the phase. But yeah, this is a classic one. And since we're talking about this parametric EQ, this is not like earlier in this video. That's actually much closer to an actual high pass at 31 hertz. But even then, this is because of how slow and how this frequency behaves. Even then, this is not exactly what it corresponds to. I mean, this, yes, is a cut at these frequencies, but you'll have to see how it actually behave in the spectrum. It's not as easy as just execute brainlessly to put a high pass there. So you start and then you move and you listen to how the low end behaves. This one is on linear phase. You're going to use this whenever you want to not alter the phase of what you've worked with. And ultimately, if you go all the way to maximum, you have the highest precision of not changing the phase at all. Personally, I've had some really good result on natural phase. And like I've explained, my mindset is more to, I'm going to affect multiple ways the signal. And then at the very, very end of everything that I've done, this is where I'm going to do some final alignment, and I'm going to get the final relationship that I like with the kick and bass. But on natural phase, I've gotten very good results with the high pass as well. Actually, the ones on linear phase will tend to be much more transparent and not very colorful, while on natural phase, you're going to hear much of a difference if you want to achieve fat low end. So this is another technique I like to do, to have this high pass, and in conjunction, you're going to have a bell that is going to push. This is really nice. And if you recall what we've seen with the Britchannel, the way the curves behaved, that's actually very similar. But this one is a bit more surgical mindset, because you can shift them however you like. You can do just this high pass trick, but you can also do this conjunction with a push. And you can kind of customize it a bit more than pre-made curves, but sometimes it's kind of a two-edged sword. It can be. And there's the zero latency mode as well. Personally, like I've said, if you don't want to change your phase at all, you have your reasons, you can use the linear phase. But when we're talking about that deep low end trick, you can have some really good result with the natural phase. And that's it for this video. Yeah, I can see why also I've been wanting to do this video for a long time, but I didn't necessarily go for it, because if I wanted to talk about this topic, and there's still things that that have not been discussed. Like I said, I want to gonna make a video about the bass being tighter and the low end being tighter. And that today was about like deep and fat. But yeah, if you want to talk about these things, there's a lot of like side concepts that all tie together. And just talking about the EQ tricks and the referencing it's not enough. It needs to be understood in the whole ecosystem and with all these concepts that we see today. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you need some help with learning electronic music production, I have a mentorship program. It's called Fractal Mentorships. Links in the descriptions. There's some free presets, private lessons, group lessons, mixing, mastering services, and bunch of videos, masterclass, lots of content. If you want some information, it's all there. You can also write to me on Instagram, on Fractal Sounds. I'll answer. We can discuss all this. And until then, I will see you in another video. Have fun with your sub frequencies at home. And I'm going to see you in another video. Happy producing.